Thank you all for coming out tonight. That helps a little bit. I'm Mary Portelli from the West Pittston Historical Society, and here to entertain you with more unknown things about West Pittston, or little known things about West Pittston that I love sharing with people. We have a number of maps and so forth up here that I'll be referring to, and you can feel free when we're finished to come up and take a closer look. I'm sure they'll be interesting to you, especially if you live in that part of West Pittston. So we're talking tonight about a portion of town that was a proposed town called Luzerne, which was not to be confused with the actual town of Luzerne that was incorporated in 1882. This was a totally different thing that existed before the actual current borough of Luzerne was even a thought. So this part of town, we're going to look at first of all how West Pittston developed, or how the area that is now West Pittston developed. So prior to 1850, everything was happening on the east side of the river. There wasn't much over here. A couple of farmhouses, mostly farms, just some land that was really, had a couple of little homes on it, but for the most part there were very few homes here. Does anybody know why? Why didn't they build on this side of the river and only over on the Pittston side? Somebody said it.
Flooding?
Not flooding. What did you say?
Flooding.
It wasn't flooding, no. Somebody said too hard to cross the river. Yeah, there wasn't a bridge. All that existed at that time, and actually it existed from the 1770s, there was the ferry. The Pittston Ferry, first was known as the Jenkins Ferry, and then became known as the Pittston Ferry. And then after people complained and complained and complained, the farmers on the west side wanted to be able to get their products over to the east side of the river, which is where the stores were, and they didn't want to have to go on the ferry every day. So they finally built a bridge in 1873, or not 1870, excuse me, 1851. So all that complaining, we need a bridge. Sound familiar? This was the very first bridge. This was called the Ferry Bridge, because the ferry used to be right along here. This is where the current Jenkins Bridge is now, the concrete bridge. This is the original bridge that was there, and it was badly damaged in 1904 in the ice flood, and eventually came down in 1924 when they built the current bridge. But this was, and it was called the Ferry Bridge because it was in that same location. But the development on the west side now started to pick up, and little by little, people started to move over to the west side, and eventually a lot of the merchants from Pittston, a lot of the business people from Pittston started to group together and purchase large chunks of land in what is now West Pittston. And there were really like 5 major developments. This is an 1873 map. I have an original up here. What I did was take a copy of it and draw out all the different developments. The very first one was 1851. It was called the West Pittston Land Association. That was the heart of West Pittston in this area. And really that's where you're going to see most of the oldest homes in town. And if you look at this 1873 map, that's where the biggest cluster of homes is at that time, because that was the first part that got bought up. They bought Peter Pollin's farm, they split it up, the developers split it up into lots and started selling them. And then a couple of years later, you had York Smith and W.C. Gildersleeve's estate bought this chunk of land over here between the Susquehanna River and York Avenue. And then different parts of land developed. Wisner, Damon, and Damon bought this chunk back here because they had factories that they wanted to build. They built a foundry and a machine shop for the mines and the railroads. And then in addition to the factory, they started building the smaller homes where their workers would live. So they were more modest homes because that's what their workers could afford. And so you see some development back in there. Not a whole lot happening up in this corner at that time. And then finally you had this, and then there was also this little chunk in here, LeCaux and Lowenstein. LeCaux is a name we all know. And then this big portion here, from halfway between Montgomery and, well, it says New York, many of you know New York is now Delaware Avenue. So halfway between Montgomery and Delaware, there was a border line. Everything to the south of that was owned by the West Pittston Coal Company. And even in 1873, you don't see a lot of development there. So this is what happened. The coal company had owned that land for a long time, and they were basically mining. But then when all of the development further north in town started to happen, it made them start thinking, we can get some money out of this land, not just with the coal. We can sell the surface and still retain our coal rights. So down in Philadelphia, there's this man, E.C. Knight, and he was the president of a sugar refinery. He later became very famous because he was creating a monopoly by buying up all the local sugar refineries, and the government came after him in the 1890s, I believe it was. But early on in 1856, West Pittston Coal Company has elected Edward C. Knight as the president. And then there's all these other people who are the directors. And some of them are local, some of them are not local. But he has become the president of the company, and he was the one that really started this whole town of Luzerne idea. And he didn't want to work together like some of the other developers did. He wanted to set up a competing town that would be better than some of the other local landowners were doing. So the first thing they did, the West Pittston Coal Company buys $25,000 worth of stock in the Lackawanna and Bloomsburg Railroad. The reason they do this is so the railroad will build their station on the coal company's lands. So they bought this farm that was owned by Maria Sharps. It would belong to the West Pittston Coal Company. That's the little green station that we all remember that was up by the railroad, or up by the Little League rather. And that was built in 1856. That's how old that station was, which is why it was such a great loss. So the railroad builds their station there. There's a picture of it. And just a little side bit, we have been made aware that one of the big West Pittston signs that's hanging on the side of this is in an antique store up in Canada. So we've got our eyes on it. So, meanwhile, people in Pittston are not real happy. They wanted a rail station, they wanted access to the railroad, but if you live, you know, at the top of William Street, and you have to walk from there across the bridge and over to the station, it's not very convenient. So they start complaining, and even people on the west side felt like if you were over by York Avenue, it was very far to walk up to where the station was. So it wasn't centrally located in town, and people were not happy. But the Pittston Gazette, which was the big newspaper at the time, says, well, you know, the coal company is not to blame. They made a fair purchase, and they have their own interests. So somebody must have been paying off the Gazette. They have their own interests to think about, and the railroad had the money, so, or the railroad needed the money, and the coal company had the money, so it was a fair offer. So now they have a station, and at this time, they decide, all right, it's time to start blocking this off and selling lots. So we actually have the original of this in our collection. Compliments of Mr. Boyd Hitchner. Some of you might remember him from doing presentations around. He bought an auction poster down in South Jersey, and it was for West Pittston. And the great sale, 100 valuable building lots, August 21st, 1856, in the town of Luzerne, known as West Pittston. And it describes everything, and it says there a half mile of 2 bridges over the Susquehanna River. Now, you know there's only 1 bridge at this point. So there's plans to build a 2nd bridge, and the railroad has a station on the property, and a large 4-story hotel to be called the Luzern House will be erected near the depot, and many first-class buildings are now being created. Another bridge will undoubtedly be built, listen to this, at the foot of Philadelphia Avenue across the Susquehanna. The avenue is 70 feet in width, and leads in a straight course from the depot to the river. So when you look at Philadelphia Avenue, you see how wide that is compared to Delaware or Montgomery or Luzerne. Luzerne is a little wider. But the plan was originally, when they laid out those lots, he made that street wider with the intent that there would be a bridge at the bottom of that street, and you would go right across the river up to the depot. So that was the plan. So on August 21st, 1856, they started selling lots. And it was 100 lots. They said they were going to stick to the avenues. So my thinking is the first homes were probably Wyoming Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, just a guess, because those were more traveled, and I think they wanted visibility. So if they started building homes on those lots, people would be coming down those roads and seeing them, and hey, let's buy a lot and build a house here. So that was the plan. And then of course they wanted to put a hotel as well. But I think just being encouraged by the great development of the West Pittston Land Association really spurred this whole thing on. So there's the auction. There's a bigger view of the poster. And this is the beautiful 4-story hotel that they built. It looks like 3 to me, but I guess they call the cupola is a 4th story. This was constructed at the top of Philadelphia Avenue, across the tracks. It's now called Lackawanna Avenue at that part of town. It's on the opposite side of the tracks from where the Little League is. It used to be Philadelphia Avenue, went straight up there. And at this point, it did. This is the current view, right here. But this was actually constructed, and just a beautiful building. And Tony was the one that colorized this for us. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
We got a photo of it from the New York Public Library. They actually had a stereo view card of this, and it's the only full view of it that I've ever seen. But it's in really good shape in this picture. And it was called the Luzern House. It was completely hand-hewn, without nails, all done with wooden pegs, which is hard to imagine, but it was. And it says it's located in the grandest panorama of scenery in the county. So that's what they were saying. The porticos are fanned by the breezes that flow across the Susquehanna. And it was marketed in the early days as a summer resort. And, you know, there was nothing much around there, so it was probably pretty bucolic and calm and relaxing to be there. People were more attracted to the West Pittston Land Association, however, to build their homes. They didn't want to be so far away from the center of town. So the lots weren't selling really well right away. And guess what happens with the hotel? It just starts to decline. It becomes, like they said, rapidly, within maybe 10 or 15 years, it became almost a flop house. And people were eventually they were just like renting rooms out by the month or whatever, and it wasn't a nice place after a short amount of time. So someone buys it at the end of the 19th century. Somebody buys it and tries to fix it up and clean it up again, but there really wasn't a great market for the house. And you even see in that old map, even in 1873, there weren't a lot of homes at that part of town. So, you know, the coal company still had their coal coming out of the land, but they weren't really selling those lots. Drinking parties happened, which was not popular at all in West Pittston, if you know much about the early days of West Pittston. I brought this slide in here because this is from, this is looking toward, this is Philadelphia Avenue back here. And you can see, this is the back end right here of the Luzern House. So you can see how eventually they started building up all these factories around it, and it really was not the resort area that people thought it might be anymore. So this is a pretty cool slide that we have from it's a glass negative. They also built, this was 1867, the Luzerne cash store. Now this was located, as near as I can tell, it was right across the street from the train depot, so it was probably like right where the Little League, the bicycle lot was, where the cell towers are now. That's as near as I can tell. And this was built by Joseph Cake, who was the father of the Joe Cake who ran the Clear Spring Coal Company that was eventually replaced by Sullivan Trail. So this was the father who started out with this little cash store, and he would trade goods in the store for if farmers brought in their produce. You know, he would trade the produce for whatever else he had to sell. So there was a little bit of bartering going on as well. And he served the coal company employees and probably some of the machine shop employees too that were living in that area. So just looking at this again, you can see how sparse this was. There's some houses along Wyoming Avenue, and again along Delaware, and a few on Philadelphia, but really not many. I know you can't see this, and I'm going to put this up on either our Facebook and our website. This is a great map. If you can, I'll make sure it's as good a copy as I can get of it. This I just discovered a couple of days ago when they started putting all those mine maps up on the news about the mine caving. This was one of the maps that was listed. This is an original landowner's map for the town of Luzerne. And if you live in that part of town, if you blow this up, all the landowners' names are listed in each of these boxes. So you find your lot and you can see who bought your land from the coal company.
What year is that?
This is, I don't know, there wasn't a year on it, because I was wondering that myself. Yeah. There's no year on it, but I know my lot has the original landowner on it. Okay. And a lot of the lots are owned by those people that were on the coal company board. So I'm guessing it's very early. Because it looks like it's a linen map, which, you know, those were the very early mid 19th century maps. So I'm thinking this might have been right from the beginning, or at least, you know, until people started buying the lots. Because a lot of those lots were bought up by investors from the coal company. Some of the guys on the board might have bought like 8 or 10 lots and then sold them individually themselves. But this is really neat to see, and I just wanted you to be aware that it's available, and I'll make sure it's on our Facebook page, and also I'll try to put it on our website, and then you can download it and get a better look at it.
Mary, what was the significance of the name Luzerne?
I never came across an explanation of that. I just think they took it from the county, maybe. At least they didn't name it after one of themselves, I guess. It could have been Knighttown after Mr. Knight. And just an overhead view of the current area. And you can see how things have developed. This is where I was saying Philadelphia Avenue, of course, used to go all the way back, but now it's Lackawanna Avenue. So the hotel would have been right here, and of course the station was here, so it was just a short walk from the station right to the hotel. And the little store, the cash store would have been here. So it's a little different now.
What's the purpose of the two baseball fields?
I'm not a Little League person. Maybe someone else knows
There's
that.
one when there's schools?
No,
One
schools
used to be
fields
a
are down.
practice field. when I was
Okay,
a
one
kid.
is a practice field and the other one
I mean, they
is.
use it now for games, but when I was a kid, it was just a practice field.
Okay, when I was a kid, the farm team played there. So, lots weren't selling. By 1857, just a year later, people are starting to think about joining together. All these little developers are starting to think about joining together. They needed to have infrastructure. They wanted a form of government, and the only way that was going to happen is if they incorporated. So all of the smaller little parts of town, plus the town of Luzerne, joined together and incorporated in 1857, establishing the new borough of West Pittston. That didn't mean that E.C. Knight was done with the town of Luzerne. The idea of the town had fizzled, but he was still dedicated to making it a pleasant place. He had plans to build a park. He offered to donate 2 acres of ground in the neighborhood of the Luzern House to the borough of West Pittston for a public park, providing the borough agrees to fence in the same and adorn it with trees and walks, etc. I'm thinking this is where the Little League ended up going. That's my guess. Because nothing was ever built in that spot. Those lots were never sold. I'm thinking those are all the lots that he held out with the hopes of building a park. And then eventually the borough took it over and put the Little League there. It's just my guess. I could be wrong. But this was 1860. And in fact, many of you know I used to live down in South Jersey for a long time. Mr. Knight lived in South Jersey as well. And there's a town next to where I live that has a Knight Park. And with a little bit of research, I found out that he was the one that built that park as well. And it's quite beautiful. It would have been nice if we had that, but the Little League is good to have as well. So in 1869, the coal company decides, the West Pittston Coal Company is ready to go out of business. And they decide they're selling out to the Lehigh Valley Railroad, or Lehigh Valley Coal Company. And at this point, they take everything, all their lands, they're selling it to the coal company. And then Lehigh Valley was selling lots for a while. Because my lot was not sold until the 1880s, and it was purchased from Lehigh Valley, not West Pittston. So, you know, if you are someone that's traced your deed back to your home and you live on that part of town, you can get a pretty good idea. You know, that's anything after 1869 would have been the Lehigh Valley Coal Company. And it faded into history at that point. The little town of Luzerne faded into history. However, you know, we still have a lot of photos, and we still see a few little remains through our maps and our posters and whatnot. Questions?
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking, so it was never incorporated and they never had like a body of government, like no mayor?
Not in Luzerne, no. It was, they had really hoped for that,
Okay,
but I think people were really looking to move more towards the center of town.
yeah, okay.
But then once there was a form of government, then a lot of buildings started to happen. Around 1880, I think a lot of that land started to, perhaps it was when it was sold off to Lehigh Valley. I don't know if there was a difference in the price of the lots. I'm not sure what they cost. But I think it was $600 that the first landowner on my lot bought the whole block. The whole block between Philadelphia and North Street and Third Street. And I think they paid $600 for that.
$700, yeah.
Okay, so you know, yeah, so
So-
that's about right.
227 Delaware Ave,
Mhm.
Lehigh Valley Coal Company to Thomas Reed.
There you
in
go,
William
okay.
Reed for $700, April of 1887.
All right, yeah, mine was 1886, so yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
I wonder
exactly.
where Lehigh Valley Coal Company came from. I realized it came
Well,
from
now
West
you
Pittston.
know, and it used to be part of West Pittston Coal Company, but, and I don't know exactly when West Pittston Coal Company formed, I wasn't able to find that out, but they were mining there for quite a while before the whole idea of the town of Luzerne came into being. But it's just a little known thing about town that, it's interesting to see how all the different sections of town develop. And one of the fun things to notice, let me go back to that map again, this one. You'll notice when the West Pittston Coal Company laid out their town, they paid no attention to what was going on over here. So the streets stopped halfway between Delaware and Montgomery. They just come to an end. Now, in some cases, I know in particular, Second Street, I remember the borough bought someone's home down there on Montgomery Avenue so that they could open up that section of Second Street between Montgomery and Delaware. So in some cases, they did that. But it's interesting to see how it just kind of comes to an end. And, or like on 4th Street, it makes that little kind of a side step to go,
They're wider.
yeah,
When you cross over Nassau Street.
right,
It's wider.
exactly,
And all the streets in Old West Pittston are narrow.
yes,
So
yes,
that's like, and then also when you turn off Montgomery, to go over to Delaware down in the first block, you know, just above it's wider.
mm-hmm,
It's narrow and then it gets wider.
This is
Why
why.
though? Cause that was our
this
backyard.
is why, right, this is
But
why.
I think you told me, Nassau Street didn't even exist.
No, no,
The people with the backyards had to give some land from Montgomery and had to give some land from Delaware and they paved it.
Yeah.
I think after World War II even, I don't even know.
okay,
Cause people started getting cars and they wanted to put garages back there. But before that, the fences just went right up against.
to the,
each other.
against each other, mm-hmm,
And they do below, like between Wyoming. in
Right.
That first block, it's
right,
the people on Delaware Avenue, their fence is just where the factories are, you know, and the
Yep.
red houses are.
Yep,
There's no
yep.
street. The only place there's a street is between 4th to 6th. Nassau.
right. So if you actually just kind of look at the overhead view, you can almost see where the sections kind of ended and started and ended. So it's an interesting thing to notice. We also had, I mentioned, we had Washington Avenue down here in the town of Luzerne, and then of course the Washington Street that we all know up here. Washington Avenue is between Boston and Erie. So that's just, I'm not sure why they changed the name of that, but, or even when that happened.
The second bridge that they were talking about on that, is that now the Water Street Bridge?
Yeah, that was, well, the first bridge there was built in 1873. So right after this map was drawn up, they did build the one on Luzerne Avenue.
Is that the Water Street Bridge
Mhm.
that it is right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not that same bridge. There was a wooden bridge built there in 1873, and then the Water Street Bridge was built in 1914, but they built it on the same old 1873 piers. So they didn't replace the piers, they just replaced the decking and the top of it. But yeah, but you can see how, you know, the ferry bridge was a toll bridge. The bridges were actually, those original bridges were actually owned by private companies, like private investors, and that's why they were toll bridges.
So they were both originally metal bridges?
Yes, and I always tell this story, that original ferry bridge, some of the metal from that was taken, when they took it down, was taken and a sculpture was created that's down on Penn State's main campus now, right outside of Sackett Building. And yeah, I'll have to put that up in
Sucks.
post sometime.
It sucks now that we're not gonna have it, a metal bridge, cause I think they wanna tear this one down and put another concrete bridge
It won't
up.
be a truss bridge, but
Yeah, it'll be a
it'll be
concrete bridge.
probably, but the design is still in the works.
Yeah.
We get to sit on the committee for that because they're taking down
I
two
wish they
historic
would
bridges.
just repair it, but it's just
I-
probably
they-
too much.
It's sad to see history go.
Exactly.
It's like when the 8th Street Bridge went, they,
I know, I do like the truss bridges and
Yeah.
it is unfortunate.
it's just more of like the historical value
Exactly.
of this valley. But didn't they do something with the 8th Street Bridge when they tore it down? They did something
I don't
with
know,
some of the
whatever, I
sections
wasn't
of it?
around here then, I was not
I don't
living
remember
back
if they
here
did
yet, so I'm
anything
not
with it
sure
or
what
not, or
happened.
they just destroyed it. I thought they did something.
We've made it very clear that we don't want something that looks like the 8th Street Bridge, and the designers kind of understand that, so we'll see. And Mayor Lombardo in Pittston has also made that statement, so hopefully we'll get something that's well designed and attractive looking. And the fact that they're historic bridges makes a big difference, they have to replace it with something equal. Judy?
There's no you found nothing to say, cause the bridge was going to be at Philadelphia, and they just moved it down. I wonder if there was, any
I
kind
don't
of
know.
competition, or what happened that it moved from that larger street, cause Luzerne Avenue is definitely narrower,
I just think that that's where the bulk of the people were living.
and they just moved it
In
one.
it, cause you know, look at 1873, there's
Pittston,
nobody
maybe.
over here.
Yeah.
You know, everybody was in here and they probably figured that made more sense.
Cause there's,
Cause remember, everybody was either walking in a horse-drawn carriage or a wagon or riding horseback.
But there
So-
were businesses on Luzerne Avenue. There were-
Exactly.
There were markets
yeah,
and.
yeah.
there was kind of the
That's
main
where all
drag
the
was Pittston.
activity was. So there wasn't much over here, so.
And there was a beach.
Right. You could go over to the beach.
Yeah, I
That's-
remember
That's another
the
story.
beach, that used to be, yeah, it used to be right off the bridge there. There
And
was-
Judy has pictures,
beach.
Yeah, there's
postcard pictures
postcards
of
here,
that.
you can buy
There
one
used
for
to be
your
a beach.
scrapbook.
Beach on the West Pittston side, there used to be a beach.
And it was there somewhat recently in terms of, I mean, recently to me, like 80 years ago, 80, 90 years ago, there was a beach there. Because I remember my mom talking about going there.
It was a
I just
racetrack.
remember the sand,
Right.
I just
Stadium
remember
was- there was a
when I was
racetrack
younger
all the way over
that
to St. Anthony.
Yep.
Mary, do you know if there's gonna be, if they plan to have bicycle lanes on the bridges?
I understand they do. And walking on both sides, walking sidewalks on both sides.
Walking the same as bicycle, or they have?
No, I think it's
designated-
different. They're different. Bicycles will have their own lanes from what I
Okay.
hear. Doesn't mean that's what's gonna actually happen, but that's what I hear.
the.
Anybody else have a question about,
The Fort Jenkins Bridge needs some repair.
About-
You said, New York Avenue became Delaware Avenue
about 1910? So if you're doing research, or if you're looking through old newspaper archives, you don't just wanna check your current street name, you wanna check if Delaware Avenue is your street, you wanna look up New York Avenue as well. And that goes for if you live on, Race Street or Susquehanna Avenue, you have to research River Street as well as Susquehanna. So it kind of gives you a little bit of guidance as to where to look. But if you haven't been into the old Pittston Gazette archives, it's addictive. And you can access them for free through the Oosterhout Library using your library card, your West Pittston library card. So you just need to have a library card with a number on it. You go onto the Oosterhout Library's website, and you can get to newspapers.com, and the Pittston Gazette is on there. A lot of the Wilkes-Barre newspapers are on there, and you can access them without a membership. Now the Dispatch is on there as well, but that requires a membership. But the others you can access. So it's really fun to look through the old papers, especially if you're looking for information about your home. It's one of the best things you can do. Look up your address. If you know people that live there, look up their names, and you find all kinds of little things that maybe have happened at your house. Was there a wedding there? Was there a funeral there? Was there a fire? Sometimes you find out things like that.
Did they ever put building notes in there, like so-and-so's building a house on certain?
Yeah, oh, all the
Did
time,
they-
all the
they don't do
time.
that anymore, but, you know.
All the time, they put building, announcements in there, and they also sometimes they include who's building it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they include things about, if it's a fancy house, they often tell what it's constructed of and where the stone is coming from or what kind of wood they're using on the interior. Everything made the newspaper back in the day, you know.
I've researched my deed and I'm having a hard time determining what year the house was actually built. I
Right.
know the lot was sold by the Lehigh Valley Coal Company to two brothers.
Okay.
In 1887, but I don't think they did anything until 1900.
Okay.
Because the deed doesn't change again until 1907. But I
We
think in
have,
1900
here's how you can find out. This is how I found out. Before the newspapers were digitized, this is how I found out. The old borough minutes have been digitized by us.
Wow, okay.
And guess what's in there? Building permits.
That far back?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. There's building permits in there, and I have them digitized. I have them in my Dropbox. I just have to figure out how to get a link onto our website so people can access them.
Wow, okay.
And I promise I'll start figuring that out.
Yeah, 'cause I'm pretty sure the house is not built 1887, I think it's more like 1900.
Yeah, mine was, the land was purchased in 1886, but they didn't build until
Yeah.
1898, I think it was. But
Just
yeah,
trying to
the
figure that out.
building permits were they didn't start right at the beginning, but I think around the 1870s you start to see building permits in the borough minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah, they were on microfilm. We owned the microfilm, so about 2 years ago we had them digitized. So they're good to go. Yeah. Yes?
How do we find out if there are mines underneath our properties?
I think those maps were on Channel 16 recently. They had
I
a
saw
link for
them, but
that.
it wasn't very.
It's
clear.
hard to access, I know.
There's a website.
If you go to Penn State's
Right.
website, and then you're able to click on the mine, it shows actually there's a lot of mines under, especially the town of Luzerne. But yeah, it's actually on Penn State's website
Oh,
that you're
Penn
able.
State? Yeah.
Yep.
More than likely, there's a mine up there.
Oh, yeah, in West
Yeah.
Pittston, there's
There's
very little chance that there isn't
More
a
than
mine.
likely, there's something, it's not solid ground that done, they're so far now.
Insurance.
I remember, Chris, I remember your dad telling me one time that the area where the stadium is, underneath, you could actually play football under there because it's that hollow. I just remember him saying that.
Yeah.
It just
More
blew
than
my
likely,
mind.
there's mines underneath there.
So I guess for those of us that haven't
In this
been
area,
down
They
there,
mine this area really,
yeah, a
really
lot,
hard.
yeah.
And especially when you got into the 1940s and the war and all the industry and all, they were really
Absolutely.
getting every inch out of it.
Will it have how deep the mines are, or? do they
I
know?
don't know enough about how to read those maps, but maybe you could find somebody that understands them and could explain it to you. Because I was looking at them last week and we were talking, you know, is it those rectangular spaces that are mined out, or is it those little roads around them that are mined out? We're not, I wasn't really sure. But yeah, so you can almost be sure if you live in this town that, yeah, and the whole valley, really.
Yeah, this
The whole valley.
is mined real hard.
If you have mine subsidence insurance, you can call the Department of Mines if you think that you want information and they'll come, because I did that.
Okay.
I had, after my mom died and all, I mean, there were cracks, and so when I took it over and we had mine subsidence insurance, cause my
they
parents
cover
lived in that
stuff,
house
right?
when they came. And they actually, two guys came with maps and went through my house and said that this is solid now because it caved and all this, and no, that's old house side.
Oh, so they
It's
can look
not.
at those and understand.
I bought that insurance.
Yeah, that's the
And-
best
and
bargain around.
It is.
Yeah, it is, but the map was still hard to read, and I didn't get as, in.
Well, I
far into it.
wanted to see if I had a claim to get some work done, because there was things that were buckled that were really strange, but they said no, it wasn't, but they read the maps and they knew that, yes, there was a mine under here.
So there
but
are
it's not-
people who will know, so I guess you just need to find somebody like that that understands how to read those maps.
So if we dig down far enough, we can dig a bunker and.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I know you came to town late, like I did, right? You only moved back here like maybe
2.5 years ago.
Yeah. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, when they were doing the sanitary sewers on Philadelphia Avenue, they had to drill through, they dug down and drilled under Wyoming Avenue to get the pipes through, and they must have gone down, I don't know how many feet it was, but you could have taken my entire house and put it in the hole. That's how deep it was. I mean, you look down the hole and the guys were like this big down at the bottom because they were so far down. And I kept saying, are they gonna run into mines? And I mean, they didn't seem to run into anything. But it was alarming at the least to see
I
how
bet.
deep they went. You know?
My parents lived in the house that I live in now, and they lived in, at the time, they bought it in 1938, and the house caved. And my parents told me that, well, they knew it was at some point they were going to, because they could hear the miners, they could hear them tapping.
They were working.
Underneath, yeah, and they could hear it, and actually, and so my father told my mother what to do if he was at work, to go down and turn the electric off and all that stuff, and sure enough, my mother was in the house when it caved, and did go down and turn it off, and all, and when she went to come back upstairs, the X in the door had X'd in, and she had to crawl out from under, and,
It was fairly common. I mean, it was not
I mean,
unusual
I
for
mean, they
things
told
to
us,
happen.
matter of fact, and they said that, and then, I guess, once the subsidence stopped and all, they must have lived there. I never heard them say that they went anyplace else, but I remember them saying they didn't have anything to cook, so it was springtime, and so all the neighbors were cooking outside, and they're outside kind of thing, while they lived in their house, and then coal company, workers came in and plastered and all, and
The coal company handled the
and
repairs.
the attitude
for
was,
people.
look, lady, you ought to be glad we're doing this. So, you know, because my mother said, well, could you just leave a little niche here and, look, lady, you ought to be glad we're doing this. Just, we're plastering and that's it. And that was it. So it was, but yeah, my parents were living in the house. I live on York Avenue, if anybody's wondering where that was, but.
Feel free to come up and take a look at this. I'll try to put this up higher so you can see it. This is an actual original map of the town of Luzerne that was probably created when they were selling lots. They would unroll the map, look at the map, which lot do you like? This would have been from 1856. So this was found in a home in town, and it has lot numbers on it, so you can look at that and figure out what your lot number is. And I don't know what you can do with that, but you could probably match it up to that other one that I'm gonna put online.
The deed,
soon.
my deed said it was lot 48.
Okay.
High Valley